Good afternoon and welcome to your review of Top Gear Series 27, Episode 4, The Jungle Adventure. Hello and welcome. This week's episode of Top Gear was interesting, entertaining, and it put a positive spin on a subject that can somewhat be viewed negatively in some ways. But I will get into that later on in the video. Now, I have no problem with this episode at all. Maybe one or two, but other than that, nothing major. At the beginning of the episode, the three presenters are found in the studio discussing classic cars and how reliable they can be if brought through a jungle. And sure enough, Paddy McGuinness and Freddie Flintoff were sent off to Borneo and Brunei to go on a road trip through the jungle with the Gurkhas. More information will be provided to you on this episode in the link below. But they went on to the jungle through with their two cars, and Paddy had chosen an original Bagheera, and surprisingly enough, it looked quite like a 1980s Porsche 924. The way it was styled, it had 3 seats. Obviously a Porsche 924 does not have that, but it had pop-up headlights and the body was similar to what you'd find on a 924. So that was interesting. While they were there, they tried their hand at bull racing and had a go at some durian fruit, which is a legacy of, or a delicacy of Borneo and Brunei. And then back in the UK, Chris Harris was tasked with trying out the new Rolls Royce Cullinan. I enjoyed this segment, although yes, there was a few not so impressive parts of the car to show. The review of the Cullinan was very positive, although it wouldn't make you go out and buy one. Chris Harris's argument for it was basically, you don't need a big car to get around the countryside or in big cities. Realistically, big cars are only used by the rich and not by the poor, because obviously the Rolls Royce brand, and along with Aston Martin and all that, they can be very expensive. So basically, don't go buying a Rolls Royce Cullinan unless you want to look like a rich person in a suit and have a big mansion. That's just, Rolls Royces are not for the poor, basically. That's what it was. So I enjoyed his review, and very much so it has now made me think about in the future whether or not I want to buy a Rolls Royce Cullinan, and the answer to that is not so much. So instead, Chris Harris opted for, at the end of his review, he opted for traditional way of getting around places, and that is by choosing a fold-up bicycle, as seen in reference to some older versions of Top Gear with James May and Jeremy Clarkson and Richard Hammond, where they decide to take an alternative transportation route in which James May takes the bicycle instead of the car, because obviously it's healthier for the environment and it's less environmentally impactful. So I leave that there. But going back to the Borneo and Brunei film that Paddy McGuinness and Freddie Flintoff had put together. This film was very interesting, and I enjoyed it. It was very entertaining throughout, kept me laughing, very enjoyable. But when they introduced the second part of the film, it was recently announced after Top Gear had filmed there, that the Sultan of Brunei had introduced that homosexuality and adultery was punishable by death. I will insert a clip of that just to go in a little bit more details about why they had to say it and what the outcome was. So, to wrap up on the Borneo and Brunei film, very entertaining, very interesting to watch, and of course hear people's opinions of them online. Very nice country, and it put a very positive spin on what is normally seen as a negative thing to talk about in terms of how people perceive the subject. This week's guest was Bob Mortimer, who I was surprised to find out did the voices of the Churchill dog on the Churchill insurance ads on television. But apart from that, he didn't start driving until he was in his mid-30s. Appeared in an ad in what looked to be the late 80s, at the time when he didn't have a driver's license, but yet was still able to drive the car. And then his lap then in the Supra was fairly impressive. He talked to himself in the third person, and he ended up beating Frankie Dettori, or coming just before Frankie Dettori. So all in all, it was a very entertaining watch. I'd highly recommend going back and watching it again. This has been your penultimate episode review of Top Gear Series 27. See you next Monday for the final review in the series of Top Gear Series 27. And if you like that video, click here to subscribe and click here to watch one of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye bye.